Hello. How does this work? Whatever. Hi. Welcome to Shmirchik. Catcher's Corner, where you'll experience all the unpleasantness that comes with me. Okay. I'm giving you attitude now. Attitude. Okay. Okay, so we're reading the book called The Anguish of the Jews. And we're up to Into the Abyss, it's called. We're up to the chapter where it talks about how things just kept getting worse and worse over the centuries leading up to the Holocaust, right? So this book is written by a Christian priest named, his name is Edward Flannery, and he became aware that nobody speaks about the crimes of the church and what they did to the Jews, which was like really bad. Not a joke, like these things, like what they did to the Jews, it wasn't normal, and nobody talks about it. It's swept under the rug. Historians don't talk about it. Schools don't teach it in school, the crimes of the church to the Jews, and Christianity's anti-Semitism, and the crime of the church. It's Christianity's anti-Semitism, and it is the people who are Christian that picked on the Jews out of jealousy and everything. So when people say, oh, Christianity is a perfect religion with imperfect people. No, I'm sorry. If a religion like this can produce such monsters, I'm sorry, but no, it's not a good religion. So we'll continue from there. That's just my opinion. By all means, I respect your freedom to choose which religion you want to be part of. If you want to be a Christian, by all means, with blessings, be Christian. Believe in your Jesus. If you want to be Muslim, I have a problem with that because, Christianity can be redeemable. As you can see, it has been redeemed in the past 50 years, right? They've become less violent. But Islam is another story, right? Because the book is just a book of madness. And Christianity, from my point of view, it's a very fancy literature. We have to wait. It's very fancy literature, Christianity, very well done, but it is nonsense. So what's less harmful? The beautiful literature, I think, because it's redeemable, right? Because it allows you to think more. Whereas in Islam, you can't think. It doesn't allow freedom of thought. So we're going into this, we left off where, we left off where we were talking about traitors in the Jewish, some Jews who were traitors to their own people and caused pain. So now we're going into the abyss. For the Jews in Spain, the last summit of glory and precipice was another royal favoritism. So embroiled, in fact, was the excommunicated King Pedro the Cruel. King Pedro the Cruel, from 1350 to 1369, in Jewish interests, and so loyally did Jews rally to his side in his feud with his brother Henry of Trastamara, that Pedro was dubbed the Judaized king, and the rumor got about, contrary to the fact, that he was a bastard son of a Jewess. Ooh, that makes him Jewish. So it wasn't true, it's just a rumor. After his death at the hands of Henry, Jews paid for their loyalty. Though the realistic new King Henry did not avenge himself too severely upon them, still allowing them to circulate in his court, their power was gone and the downward course began. But if Henry managed to protect the Jews from the furies that raged against them, this was only a reprieve. The courts henceforth lost no opportunity to curb them, introducing into Spain the oppressive measures long since practiced across the Pyrenees. The badge was finally made compulsory. So now you had to, like what Hitler did to the Jews by forcing them to wear a yellow star. So he was making the Jews wear a badge. The nobles continued to chafe under mortgages held by Jews. The clergy, especially the Dominican friars, inveighed against their loftiness as an insult to the church, and the people steadfastly saw the successful Jew as the source of their woes. Jewish spiritual life continued to degenerate. Cultivated Jews bore their religion lightly, and many were converted to Christianity, as often as not merely to maintain their status quo. The stage was set for another convulsion in Jewish history, which would have unique consequences. It first appeared in the person of Ferrand Martinez, an archdeacon in Seville, who since 1378 had been waging a relentless campaign against Jewish doctrines, wealth, and activities. Some excesses occurred, and Martinez was mildly reproached by the crown, but more severely by the archbishop. Deaf to these remonstrances, he persisted in his preachings, and during a simultaneous interregnum of the crown and the archbishopric in 1391, so aroused the populace that they rushed upon the Juderia, the Jewish quarter, and sacked it. The uprising was put down. 2 of the ringleaders were flogged before a rebellious crowd, and further steps were taken to maintain order. But Martinez continued to inflame the masses. 3 months later, the Holocaust began. With renewed fury, the mob broke into the Juderia of Seville. So the Holocaust, I think it means a disaster, right? Like the Shoah means a disaster. It's like a terrible thing to happen. So it could also mean like that they started to kill Jews in mass, right? With renewed fury, the mob broke into the Juderia of Seville and left it in ruins. 4,000 Jews were killed. It's a genocide, right? But the genocide is with the intent to kill all Jews. If you have that intent, the intention to kill all Jews, or as many as you can, that is a genocide. That's the definition, right? 4,000 Jews were killed, but the majority, including the aged Abravanel, former minister to the king, escaped death by accepting baptism? Really? He accepted baptism? From Seville, the carnage spread like a plague throughout all Spain, except the provinces of Granada and Portugal, engulfing some 70 Jewish communities. In some Juderias, not a single Jew was left, and many synagogues were turned into churches. Authorities were helpless before the onslaught. To their credit, some members of the clergy and the nobility offered Jews the shelter of their homes from the impassioned mob. In 3 months, it was over. Some 50,000 Jews were dead, and several times that number baptized, including many rabbis. Yeah, so this is the crimes of it's like a Holocaust, yeah. A Holocaust happened many times on Jewish people. Wow. And this happened in the year of 1378. And, Abravanel, I can't believe he actually converted, because I remember one of them left. One of them left the country to be with his people. What? Abravanel. Did he convert? Converted to... During the anti-Jewish riots of 1391, he was converted to Christianity under the name of Juan Sanchez de Sevilla and was appointed comptroller in Castile. What? He was forcibly converted, but like convert or die, right? He was one of the oldest and most distinguished Jewish families. They first achieved prominence in Iberian Peninsula. He was a treasurer and tax collector under Sancho IV of Castile from 1284 to 1295. I did a video on him, but I didn't know that. He was probably the Almoxarife collector of revenues of Castile. Don Judah Abravanel and his family later fled to Lisbon, Portugal, where they reverted to Judaism and filled important governmental posts. So, in 1310, he and other Jews guaranteed the loans made to the crown of Castile to finance the siege of Algeciras. He probably was Almoxarife, collector of revenues of Castile. Don Judah Abravanel and his family later fled to Lisbon, Portugal, where they reverted to Judaism and filled important governmental posts. His son Judah died in 1471. So, I didn't know that they did that. I wonder why. Right? Like, why would he... During the anti-Jewish riots of 1391, he was converted to Christianity under the name of Juan Sanchez de Sevilla and was appointed comptroller in Castile. It is thought that a passage in the poem in the Cancionero de Baane, attributed to Alfonso Alvarez de Villasandino, refers to him. He and his family apparently later fled to Portugal, where they reverted to Judaism and filled important roles. But, so, later he's apparently the service of Duke. He was in the service of the Duke of Braganza. His export businesses also brought him into a trade related with Flanders. He was the father of Don Isaac Abravanel and grandfather of Judah Abravanel. So, he wasn't the one that was actually considered great, like the great writer and the great holy saint. It was his kids that were considered that. Wow. I can't believe it. You can buy the book to read about his life, what happened to him. Oh my god. Okay, so yes, I'm a little bit shocked myself because I didn't know this. I guess it was his sons that became great, even though he was considered a leader. But I guess he did what he thought was right under the circumstances, because convert or die. It's like to watch your entire family be slaughtered, or just to convert and pretend to be something you're not, and then, right? Okay, so let's see what they say. Okay. In the months that followed, I read the book and developed a keen interest in Abravanel. I found his character weaving itself into a short story I was writing during that time, which pushed me to read the book more deeply, as well as some of Abravanel's biblical commentary in the original Hebrew. I knew Abravanel as Abarbanel, the commonly accepted pronunciation of the name in the Jewish community, at first as a biblical commentator whose opinions were brought into my classes on the Torah and the prophets, and then as a historical figure who had a pivotal role during the period of the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492. But his biography really brought everything together for me about his character and his role in history. I can't deal with that noise out there. So allow me to introduce you to Awesome Jew of History number 2, Don Isaac Abravanel. Right? Don Isaac Abravanel was born in Lisbon in 1437 to one of the wealthiest, most distinguished Jewish families in Iberia. His grandfather, Don Shmuel, served 3 successive Castilian kings, and in the days of Enrique III, he had assumed the office of Cantador Mayor, the highest position in Castile's financial administration. He was outspoken in defense of the Jews and Judaism, and in his native Seville. And the Jews of Spain considered him their leader. So you can imagine the shock and how horrified and shocked they were when he converted to Christianity, apparently voluntarily. As a result of his conversion, the older of his children cut off ties with him and moved to Portugal. Among those estranged sons was Don Judah, Don Isaac's father. Wow. So he did it voluntarily. He wasn't forced. Seriously? Don Judah did well in Lisbon, apparently becoming... So the kids moved away. They moved to another country once they found out their father, converted to Christianity. Right? Apparently becoming a royal treasurer of Ja'o I. Okay, so Don Judah did well in Lisbon, apparently becoming a royal treasurer for Ja'o I. And Don Isaac was brought up with a great deal of wealth, familiarity with the nobility and royalty, and a thorough Jewish and secular education. He began writing biblical commentary and philosophical works as a young man. And I can tell you, as someone who translated bits of his writing to work into my story, the man was overflowing with the words of the Bible, even when he wasn't talking about it. The text I translated was mostly autobiography, and yet every sentence made multiple biblical references. If I was unsure about some phrase or other, I just Googled it and immediately found it in Psalms or Jeremiah or Deuteronomy. As an adult, he moved into a position of power under Alfonso V, who appointed him treasurer. But the problem with getting friendly with the King of Portugal, or any other medieval monarch for that matter, and establishing yourself in his royal court, is that there's a fast turnover rate, and more often than not, the following king is going to suspect you of other loyalties. That's what happened to Abravanel. When Ja'o II took the throne, he suspected Abravanel of treason, and eventually put out a warrant for his arrest. Abravanel was certain of his innocence, but understood that he stood no chance of convincing the king. So he fled to Castile. The king seized all his assets. Thus Abravanel lost his entire fortune, and had to start over in a new kingdom. But guys like Abravanel don't really manage to keep a low profile. Abravanel employed his exceptional knowledge and skills, and slowly worked his way up the social ladder. His skills eventually came to the attention of one King Fernando of Aragon. Fernando and Isabel employed him as a financier, and he became second only to Avram Sr. as the highest-ranking Jew in the kingdom. It's interesting to note that despite everything, Abravanel seems to have had something resembling a good relationship with the Catholic monarchs. Fernando was a very slippery, poker-faced kind of guy, managing to make everyone think they were getting along great while stabbing them in the back. So in 1492, when the Catholic monarchs captured Granada and issued that Alhambra decree, Abravanel was in a very unique and crucial position, having a place of power and esteem with the royal court. Within the royal court, he and Abraham Sr. worked tirelessly to cancel the decree. They had an audience with Fernando 3 times, appealing to his practical side, offering him an enormous bribe to be collected from the Jewish community. But Mr. Aragonese Pokerface never committed to anything, always dismissing them with a "I'll think about it" kind of response. Thus unsuccessful. They tried appealing to Isabel. With Isabel, Abravanel took an entirely different approach. Writes Netanyahu, he now spoke to the queen, the haughty, fanatic, and often ferocious Isabella, not like her financial agent, not even like a cautious diplomatic courier. He spoke to her now like a scion of the house of David and a representative of an unconquered and unconquerable people. He spoke to her, moreover, like a prophet of old, endearing, castigating, and threatening language. If Isabella thought that, by measures like the expulsion, the Jews could be brought to surrender or to extinction, she was greatly mistaken. He pointed out to her the eternity of the Jewish people, and that they had outlived all who had attempted to destroy them, that it was beyond human capacity to destroy the Jewish people, and that those who tried to do so only invited themselves divine punishment and disaster. Isabel's response, too, echoes eerily prophetic through the annals of history. Do you believe that this comes upon you from us? The Lord hath put this thing into the heart of the king. Oh, so that's an excuse, It's an excuse for her to abuse the Jews, like to say, oh, if it's from If it's from us, it's from God. And so Don Isaac Abravanel failed to reverse their fate of his people. Abraham Sr. converted to Christianity in order to stay in Castile, and Abravanel left with his brethren, losing his fortune and his honor for the second time. Wow. Abravanel moved to Naples. Italy was very unstable at the time, and he had to move around a lot in the coming years because of various wars. He eventually settled in Venice, and he died there in 1508. Like all of his contemporaries, Abravanel struggled to make sense of the expulsion. As you know, it was one of the most highly traumatic crises in Jewish history, and many Jews found themselves in places of deep discouragement and despair. Some feared that the expulsion marked the beginning of the end of the Jewish people. Abravanel's response to the crisis was a mystical, spiritual one. He wrote extensively about the coming of the Messianic era, and even calculated when the Messiah would come. He had some compelling arguments for the year 1503, but obviously he turned out to be very wrong. When I read articles about Abravanel in the past, and learned about this feature of his writings, I found it annoying and depressing. He was so sure that the horrors of the expulsion marked the beginning of the redemption with a capital R, and here we are 500 years later, still saying any minute now. Any minute now. But when I read Netanyahu's take on this aspect of Abravanel's philosophy, I saw it in a new way. One of the things I have learned about hope is in the last few years is that it has intrinsic value that is completely detached from outcome. As I wrote on this article for Trish Hopkinson's blog, I saw hope, as a seductive and deceptive force that enticed me to climb higher. Making the inevitable fall hurt that much more. But that place it takes us is not just a place we fall from. It's a place where we see farther, where we breathe better, where we reach higher. Abravanel gave the Jewish people hope. Right. That's right. And I feel like hope is so important. Hope in life is so important because when people live for no reason and they don't have hope for the future, hope for themselves, it's very depressing, and it's like the saddest thing anyone can ever experience, right? He gave great detail and vivid color to a very theoretical idea of the bright future that lay somewhere ahead of all this gloom. Our national anthem is called The Hope for a reason. Hope is what has carried us through and kept us moving forward even in the darkest of times. For that, if not for the vast library of intriguing ideas and scholarship he left behind, and for his tireless effort to make the world a better place for Jews and non-Jews alike, he deserves to be remembered as a great man and an awesome Jew of history. Love, Daniela. So it was the senior, the guy, the father from Abravanel's father, who, WIS, who converted voluntarily to Christianity because he didn't want to give up his position and his goods. So his kids left because they wouldn't convert, and they went to Portugal. Continuing on. Okay, so Abravanel, former minister of the king, escaped death by accepting baptism. From Seville, the carnage spread like a plague throughout all Spain, except the provinces of Granada and Portugal, engulfing some 70 Jewish communities. In some Juderias, not a single Jew was left. In some, like Jewish communities, there was not a single Jew left, and many synagogues were turned into churches. Authorities were helpless before the onslaught. To their credit, some members of the clergy and the nobility offered Jews the shelter of their homes from the impassioned mob. In 3 months, it was over. Some 50,000 Jews were dead, and several times that number baptized, including many rabbis. A few took their lives to sanctify the name, and a few escaped to Granada, Portugal, and North Africa. Retribution was scant. 25 ringleaders were executed by John I of Aragon, and Martinez was imprisoned by Henry III. Missionary efforts, right? Yeah, and so when I think about missionaries, right, it's just so horrific what the Christians do, and they don't realize how offensive it is to knock on Jewish people's homes and try to give out pamphlets to try to convince Jewish people to convert to Christianity. It's so offensive and it's grotesque, if you know our history, right? A lot of them, they really believe that they're doing the right thing, but they're really not. They're really rubbing salt into our wounds when they come and try to convert us to their barbaric religion. Okay, the most remarkable aftermath of these horrific events was the number of baptized Jews in Spain. Henceforward, the fortunes of Spanish Judaism would center almost entirely on the presence and doings of these conversos. A first development took the form of an intensified desire within the church to complete the task of conversion, which the large influx into her ranks had only served to incite. The Jews remaining in Spain now appeared to the church as a scandal and a temptation to their converted brethren, and to the state as the final obstacle to a united Christendom. Not least in the renewed missionary efforts was the contribution of Jewish converts themselves. Almost every century had its exemplar of missionary zeal among them, and 14th century Spain was no exception. In Paul of Santa Maria, it possessed one of the most extraordinary. Once a talented rabbi of Burgos named Solomon Levy. This converso entered the church, studying theology in Paris. Specialized in scholastic philosophy, was ordained, and became bishop of Burgos as well as keeper of the seal to the king. Oh, so this rabbi of Burgos named Solomon Levy, he converted to Christianity. So he became bishop of Burgos, and as well as keeper of the seal to the king and a regent. He labored ardently for the conversion of his people, and in both his writings and preaching, his effort to convince them of Christianity was unceasing. He disgusts me because he's basically a traitor, and it was people like him that caused more suffering to the Jewish people. He was vigorously attacked by Jewish writers of the time who, suspecting his motives, saw him as a bitter enemy and laid at his door much of the anti-Jewish legislation of the day, right? So you see here, Jews who converted to Christianity, a lot of the time they would convince the people in the upper powers that be to be more vicious and pass laws against the Jewish community. He was greatly revered by the Christians, of course, because who doesn't love a Jewish traitor? And we have many like that, you know. Not many, but we do have a good amount of Jewish people who will kiss the ass of our enemies to try find favor and to try to elevate themselves in some way. What they don't realize is that our enemies, they don't like us because we're Jewish, and they don't respect the Jew that spits on themselves. Like, they don't respect Jews who have no self-respect. That he maligned Jews and urged legislation against them is confirmed on the Christian side by the efforts of the Cardinal of Pamplona and other churchmen to dissuade him from his criticisms. Another brilliant convert of the time was Geronimo de Santa Fe, who similarly joined in the conversionist movement. Above these towers, the figure of Saint Vincent Ferrer, Dominican miracle worker, an excellent preacher, and totally dedicated to the conversion of the Jews. Throughout Castile and Aragon, he passed from synagogue to synagogue, the Torah in one hand, the crucifix in the other hand, and a band of the devout at his heels. His successes were phenomenal. Some Jews were in dread of him and fled to the mountains. See, so there were Jews who were really evil and wicked that would do such a thing. Can you imagine? Like, Christianity is completely opposed to Judaism in every single way, because Christianity is idolatry, and because they worship a man as a god, which is completely idol worship. That's the definition. And so he had the chutzpah, the disgusting gall, to go and hold a crucifix in one hand, and our holy Torah that is opposed to that crucifix, we're supposed to crack that crucifix and burn it, right? And wow, like, this makes me angry. Disgusting. Others followed him in the font. In 1 month in Toledo, he made 4,000 converts. He is credited with 35,000 baptisms of Jews between 1411 and 1412. He has a very good place in hell, I'm sure. When he failed to persuade, he was severe and is believed to have inspired the first compulsory Spanish ghettos. Right, so you see, You see, Jews like him, they need to be given the punishment of a traitor because they cause Jews to suffer for the fact that they want to stay true to their religion. He's the one that was responsible for stuffing Jews in ghettos, right? It just makes me so angry, right? Thank you. You like my dress. Thank you. Wow. So he inspired the first compulsory Spanish ghettos and the oppressive legislation of 1414, which narrowly circumscribed Jewish social activities. Jews considered him a scourge, but he was as much one to their enemies. He strongly condemned forced baptisms or violence to Jews. Oh, he's so noble. And his preaching, right, so, you know, he gives you an offer you can't refuse, this traitor, right? Convert or be picked on, right? Okay, you don't have to convert, but if you don't convert, then you're just gonna be stuffed in a ghetto. You won't be able to have a job. Your kids will be hungry, right? Like, yeah, giving us offers we can't refuse. Disgusting. I hope he's burning in hell. I really do. And his preaching reminded Christians of their Hebrew roots. Speaking of the contempt of the old Christians for the neo-conversos, he exclaimed, "They despise them because they are Jews, but they should not, for Jesus Christ was a Jew, and the Blessed Virgin was a Jewess, before they were Christians. It is a great sin to vilify them. This circumcised God is our God, and you will be damned, as will one who dies a Jew, for one must teach them the doctrine in order that they will be in the service of God." Oh, he's so noble. Bitch. I need to calm down. Okay, I need to put on lipstick. To calm down, I need to put on lipstick. Lipstick. Right? In case you can't tell, I am very proud of who I am, where I come from, and where I'm going. Lipstick. Calm down. Don't get angry. Calm down. Everything's good. Everything's fine. Well, some rabbis do believe in hell, but the idea of hell is very different for Jews. So, like, it's not written in Tanakh. Hell is not written in Tanakh, but we believe in afterlife, and we believe in a different type of hell. A lot of rabbis describe hell as, like, the rabbis who are in charge of who spoke about, like, oral law and stuff. But listen, yeah, hell is not really a Jewish thing, but it is the type of hell that you think is not the same hell that Jewish people think, right? So, how does author have all these stories? Documents. What do you mean? Documented history, letters that are letters that are verified, that have been in museums, right? Like, that's how you know stories that were from days of old, right? So there are books written about it, and how do you think any of these stories come into being? How do you think we know what happened in the 1948 War of Independence in Israel? Because we have documents that have been verified by many people, right? Like, obviously, I mean, how do you know about World War II? How do you know about the Holocaust? How do you know about the what happened in? How do you know about the genocide in Bosnia? How do we know about it? There are survivors, there were witnesses, it's all verified, right? So they were ages ago, so someone at the time written it, and they have been transmitted over the ages, so it's time book has been written. There were witnesses, firstly, that wrote down their accounts, which are corroborated with each other, and it's been passed down from generation to generation. However, However, we know how history works. How does history work, right? How does history work? How do we know what happened in history? How, right? What is the source for the specific story with the mass conversions in Portugal? What is the source? Rabbis wrote it. Rabbis wrote it in their accounts, right? It's written in the church, in documents in the church, right? If you go and look, there's many ways you can find it out. You know, like if you're gonna try to discredit what I'm reading, then you're a piece of garbage. You know what I'm saying? How do you think history is recorded? Like, I don't get your question. Like, are you not? You sound a little bit thick. You know. You sound a little bit thick, but okay. You are who you are, you know. Little Nazi little Nazi bigot running around, right? Little Nazis running around trying to discredit truth in history. It's okay. People like you have trouble coming, right? Okay, continuing on. Most spectacular of the conversionist projects was the disputation set up in Tortosa in 1413. Like, we have all the numbers, right? We have all the years. We have what happened under this king, right? It's written. We have the reason why we know what happened to the Jews is because the kings have it written in their documents and their chronicles, right? Like, each kingdom had their documents, and they had their papers, and they had their laws all written down, and those have been preserved. That's how we know what happened to the Jews. But you sound thick. Like, it makes me so, I'm embarrassed for you. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm embarrassed for you that you can even ask such a question, because go do your own research yourself. It's obvious, right? Like Pope Benedict. Go look at Pope Benedict. Go look at the documents. Go look it up. You want to know if it's the truth? Go look it up for yourself, right? Like, I'm just asking questions. Like Candace Owen, I'm just asking questions. Oh, Mengele, why would they do experiments on children? You know, I'm just asking questions. Why would they do it? Who says they did it? Then we have all the witnesses, all the witness statements that have been documented and corroborated by other people who've gone through the same experience, right? That's how we know what history is. But people like you, little Nazis running around, like little people who try to, like, pick at everything. You know what I'm saying? Pick at everything, right? Pick at everything. You sound like a little bitch. WIS. Like, what's your problem? Like, do you have a problem with me? Like, you're trying to pick a fight? Like, what's going on? Like, have you woken up on the wrong side of the bed? Like, what? Do you know what I'm saying? You're crazy. Okay. Most spectacular of the conversionist projects was the disputation set in the Tortosa in 1413. Certainly the most grandiose of all such debates. The Jews of Aragon and Catalonia were compelled by anti-Pope Benedict X3 to attend it. A debate. Geronimo of Santa Fe, an outstanding Talmudic scholar and convert, represented the Christian cause against 14 learned rabbis before Benedict and a brilliant entourage. The contest went on for a year and 9 months, with audiences of 2,000 attending. Wow, that's a big audience. 3,000 Jews were converted, including all but 2 of the rabbinical debaters, who asked for an end to the faith. At the end, Benedict prohibited the Talmud. Right, so they wanted to take away our books. They wanted to expel us, kill us, convert us, and squash us, and get rid of us. He applied further restrictions and prescribed informed sermons throughout this era. Throughout this era, many Jews, even whole communities, joined the church. For the next several decades, a period of relative calm marked Jewish-Christian relations. Both ecclesiastical and civil authorities imposed severe restrictions, definitively putting Spanish Jews on a par with their brethren in the rest of Europe. They also invoked the traditional protectionist policy, which condemned forced baptisms and violence against Jews and provided guarantees for Jewish worship. The calm, however, was not complete. Occasional uprisings, massacres, and ritual murder accusations made their appearances, but failed to dominate the situation. The attention of Christians was no longer concentrated on Jews, but rather on the mass of converted Jews who had crowded into the church in 1391 and 1411 to 1414. So now they wanted to go and pick on the Jews who were already converted. See, a lot of Jews thought they can escape if they convert to Christianity. They could escape persecution as Jews. But we understand, right, from history, that the Jews that actually converted to Christianity and they didn't leave, right, they ended up like suffering much more because they were accused. A lot of Jews who converted to Christianity were accused of still holding on to their old beliefs, right? And yeah, so you get triggered by nothing, because I know what you're doing, you idiot. I know what you're doing, you know, like you're a little Nazi that comes on here to try to discredit Jews and the history. You're like Candace Owens, who's like, I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. You know, like, oh, where's the source? Oh, you give her the source. Oh, she'll find a way to discredit that, right? Like people like you're all the same. If you are really sincere in your wanting to know the truth and the knowledge and wanting the source, go look it up yourself. Go look it up yourself. The internet has millions of pages. You can go and find the sources. Maybe go to your local library and figure out where it said what and what king did what to which Jews, right? But here it's all combined in a book written by a Christian man, and it's called The Anguish of the Jews, Anti-Semitism, Edward H. Flannery. Go look it up, right? So that's that, right? Okay. I'm not born yesterday. I know people like you. I know what you're trying to do, you know? Little Nazis running around, running wild, trying to like be petty and pick. Do you know what I'm saying? You can go look up the book yourself, my darling. You know the name of the book? Go look it up yourself. God. Laziness. You're lazy. The laziness is exemplary. And guess what? People who are lazy, you're never going to learn anything for yourself. That's the truth. Okay. The Marranos, right? So this is like the worst time for the Jews. There were books written on it, and even like historical fiction, which is very interesting. And it's disturbing. Right? Very disturbing. Right? Let's see this for fun. It's a document. Let's see if it's a document. More apps. Internet Explorer. Okay. Ugh, seriously? Excuse me. Can't see the downloads? Okay, it's not letting me. What did I just do? Never mind. Excuse me. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Okay. I'm not sure if I have the energy to read the Marranos. It's another whole thing about what happened to the Jews. Maybe I should go get myself water, and then I'll be able to do it, right? Let's do that. Nicholas Evans. story of murder. Nora Robinson. Memory Palace. Okay, Surviving Schizophrenia. This is the book that I want to read next. This is the book I want to read next. Schizophrenia. Smells. Seriously? I don't want to read all this. A manual for families, consumers, and providers. I thought it was a story. Now it's a manual for families. When was this book written? Oh, it's not going to work for me. Okay, let's tackle this. The Marranos. It had become apparent that all conversos had not broken with their former faith. Many adhering outwardly to Christianity practiced Judaism in varying degrees, secretly, sometimes quite openly. Even with the connivance of both ecclesiastical and civil authorities, some of course were sincere, as, for example, many of St. Vincent's converts. Among the rest, two groups are distinguishable. There were those who, regretting the step they had taken, practiced their old faith clandestinely, or awaited the moment when they might, in exile, re-embrace their old faiths openly. Some of these even practiced rites of de-Christianizations, or washing off the baptism, if not other ceremonies of a less respectful kind. Others, bad Jews before, now worse Christians. Many made of the most of their situation. There were Jews who were considered bad Jews before, but now they were the worst of the Christians. They made the most of their new situation, maintaining relations with their Jewish confreres and their customs. They threw themselves eagerly in the communal Spanish life, and soon could be found in all its segments. Many reaching the higher echelons of the trades and professions, of the universities, the judiciary, and even the church. They intermarried with the Christian nobility and grew wealthy and influential. These compromises won the contempt of their suffering Jewish brethren. These compromisers won the contempt of their suffering Jewish brethren, who considered them unprincipled renegades. Official Jewish policy, however, was more lenient. These Anusim, the forced ones, were still considered Jews, and the policy of Rashi and Rabbi Gershom of Mainz. Right, so it is a well-known story what happened to the Jewish people, because it's recorded by Rashi, one of the greatest commentaries on the Tanakh, right? How do we know the story? It's not only from the recordings of what's written in the church and their legislature, which is documents, that they still have about Jews, right? It's also, we know this from Rashi, who was the commentator on Tanakh. And this is how Jewish people, we know our history. And even people like you who try to delegitimize our story and say we're liars and, there's no proof, and this and that and that. It's just your attempt to erase the barbaric history of your people, right? Even though you're not responsible yourself for doing it, but you're just making things worse for yourself when you try to delegitimize our story. You just make yourself look worse, and you bring hell on yourself, literally. I need water. I get very triggered by Nazis. That's the truth. Little Nazis running around, running their mouth. Unbelievable. Okay. Water. Nazis running their mouth. I've had enough of Nazis. That's what it is. I've had enough of Nazis. Done. You know? Right, so Rashi and Rabbi Gershom of Mainz from 960, of reinstating them without punishment or embarrassment was generally followed. Right, so Jews who wanted to return to Judaism, they were not to be treated differently. They were to be accepted and loved back into the fold, because a lot of them were forced, or they regretted it, even if they volunteered to convert. Church policy, on the other hand, was not so simple. Baptism, even if accepted under duress, was deemed valid and binding. Christianity. For valid ministration, it was held sufficient that the recipient had not openly expressed opposition at the moments of reception of a sacrament, even if such expression meant instant death. Right, so if you'd express yourself and say, no, I don't want to do this, you just get killed. So most Jews wouldn't want to die. But they even if they're convert by force, they have to be Christian, and they're not allowed to return to Judaism, or they will get killed. So such was implied in the ruling of Toledan councils. The Toledan councils. You see? Here, go look up rules on Jews in the Toledan Council. Go look up rules on Jews who converted to Christianity by force in the Toledan councils. Go look it up and see what documents come up. And also of Innocent III, who wrote, "Whoever is led to Christianity by violence, by fear and torture, receives the imprint of Christianity and can be forced to observe the Christian faith." Yeah, lovely. Wow. Wow. As the 15th century progressed and a new generation of nuevos conversos, converts persisted in the duplicity of their parents, the anger of both clergy and people rose against them. The people, contemptuous of their double standard and envious of their success, hated them more than they did true Jews. Because you see, even if Jewish people, this is why the Jewish people that convert or the Jewish people that go against their own people can be so dangerous, because like Jewish people, they have a Yiddish kepeles. They have the Jewish brains. So because we have a tradition of learning, so it sharpens the mind. So they can be very successful. Or if they are people who are traitors and want to hurt their people, they can do it in such a way and be very successful at it because they're smart, right? And that's what makes them so dangerous. But here we see that the Jews who converted willingly, they were going up, and getting more and more successful in the church and in their society of Christianity. And the people, other Christians that saw that, they still saw them as Jews. And, it's the Jews who they're going to accuse them of being, even if they are sincere converts, even if they really mean to be Christian, they're still going to be suspected of and accused. They'll be accused of doing the most horrible things in order to get them downgraded, and that they should not be successful because they're jealous, right? So it seems like that was happening here, right? So, right. So they here we see that the Jewish people who converted to Christianity, willingly or by force, they became more hated than the Jews who stuck to their faith, because, now they are robbing the other Christians of their high places in standing, because the Jews are smarter and they can they can be more successful in anything they do, right? So then that causes jealousy, and so now they are becoming suspected, and now they're going to start torturing those Jews who are forced converts or converted willingly. They're going to start torturing them and hurting them, right? Because, if you're a Jew, you're a Jew. It doesn't matter. You convert to Christianity. At the end of the day, the Christians are going to see. At the end of the day, the Christians are going to see they won't see them as a Christian. They'll see them as a Jew. Right? Right, Jews can't escape their identity. The people, contemptuous of their double standard and envious of their success, hated them more than they did true Jews, and referred to them as Marranos, swine. The pulpits throughout Spain rang out against them and their defilement of the sacraments, and the Cortes in Toledo decreed that the new Christians could not hold civils or church posts. A decree opposed by Pope Nicholas V. The reaction against the Marranos broke into violence towards the mid-century. In 1440, they were attacked when they attempted to collect governmental taxes. A function many of them had taken up. And though they defended themselves, several of these tax collectors were killed and many of their homes burned. In 1460, the Franciscan friar Alfonso de Spina, for Totalitum Fidei, Fortress of the Faith, was published, a bitter work in which he elaborated all the old libels against the Jews. Although he returned the brunt of his attack against the Marranos, the book strongly influenced public opinion and furthered the subtle erasure of distinction between Jew and Marrano. And further the subtle erasure of distinction between Jew and Marrano already taking place. Anti-Semitism and anti-Marranism fed upon one another, and the notion grew that the evil in Judaism and Marranism had common source: hereditary Jewishness, mala sangre, bad blood. Jews, baptized or not, were perverse and defiled. We witness here the birth of Spanish racism, which in due course grew into a veritable obsession concerning limpieza de sangre, purity of blood. In other words, freedom from the taints of Jewish blood transmitted by Marranos. Even religious orders succumbed to the mania. Judaism was no longer solely a theological problem, but an ethnic one as well. Meanwhile, attacks against the Marranos multiplied, culminating in those of 1473 to 1474, which may be compared to the hecatombs of 1391. Friar de Spina was prominent among those religious who had for some time been calling for the introduction of the Inquisition into Spain to cope with the problem. This tribunal, founded in the 13th century by the Holy See to combat the Albigensian heresy, had already been introduced into Aragon, where it functioned at a moderate tempo. Jews were considered outside its province, except in the Maimonist feud, but not so the Marranos, who were not deemed Jews. But heretical Christians. Numerous calls for introduction of the Inquisition came from the Dominican and Franciscan orders, who had been assigned by the Holy See to supervise the orthodoxy of the faith. Some of their members, as confessors and advisors to royalty, pressed their plea vigorously before the secular arm. The prospect of such an introduction was opposed by the nobility and many members of the diocesan clergy, but acclaimed by the people, who, enraged by the Marranos' ascendancy, because they were going higher and higher and getting more important, hoped for their punishment. Why should these hypocrites, they reasoned, enjoy high station while professing Jews suffered for their faith? In 1479, when Ferdinand and Isabel united the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, the possibility of a unified Christian Spain became more immediate, and at this precise moment, Thomas Torquemada, the king's Dominican confessor, importuned the sovereigns to establish the tribunal. Prominent Marranos besought the Holy See to withhold this introduction, but succeeded in obtaining only a short delay. In 1480, after disputes about its control, permission for its introduction under secular control was granted by Sixtus IV from 1471 to 1484. with 2 Dominicans in charge. A wholesale arrest of Marranos followed, and in the following year the first auto de fe was held, in which 6 men and women of Jewish descent were burnt at the stake. It was the small beginning of a gigantic operation that would spread to all major Spanish cities, condemned thousands of Marranos to the stake, and many times more to imprisonment, public humiliation, and confiscation of property. Torquemada was appointed Inquisitor General in 1483. Under his administration, the Inquisition attained its efficiency and ruthlessness that held not only Marranos but all Spanish Jewry in the state of terror for years. Elaborate regulations were set forth for detecting Judaizers. A list of 37 clues was published to help ferret them out. Failing to wear one's best clothing on Sunday, or the omission of the Gloria Patri in prayer, were typical of the detailed grounds for suspicions. The faithful were obliged, under severe penalties, to denounce suspects. The rabbis were enjoined to impose solemn excommunication on their faithful or failure to denounce. 30 days of grace were given for self-denunciation, after which torture was employed to elicit confessions of guilt. So brutal became the efficiency of the Torquemada and later tribunals that the Holy See, which had lost all influence over them, intervened on several occasions. The first of these was the Remonstrance of Sixtus IV, in which he intimated that avarice and lust for gain motivated the operation of the tribunal more than zeal for salvation of souls. So it was greed, because if they would kill the Jews that were in high places and accuse them of being a heretic, they can just steal their money, steal all their assets, right? So this is another crime of, Christianity. Many crimes the Christian church has done throughout 2,000 years, which is unforgivable. And I learned about this growing up. This was part of what we learned. Jewish history. This is Jewish history. So, indeed, the economic motive prompted so much a part of the proceedings that the skeletons of diseased suspects were exhumed for trial. Sounds like Hamas, like terrorists. In the event of condemnation, the inheritance of the disease was confiscated, the assets accruing, as in the case of living Marranos, to the crown. Wow. Can you stop eating onions because my eyes are tearing? Because I have strange addictions. I have strange addictions. What can I do? Excuse me. So rude. Do you go grocery shopping with that trolley bag? What trolley bag? Am I not seeing things? Whatever. I'm sorry for blowing up at you. I just think you're a little Nazi. That's why. I shouldn't get upset. Right? I shouldn't apologize either. Why would I apologize? Right? Like, my trolley bag. Oh, this. Yeah, I go shopping and I put everything in it. Like an old lady. All the old people, they have this trolley bag, and I become one of them. Now I fit completely into the city. I'm just asking questions. Why would the Nazis want to do experiments on twins? It sounds bizarre. No one would want to do that. Where's the proof? Where's the proof? Where's the documents? Where's the source? It's unbelievable. Friar de Spina was prominently among those who had for some time been calling for the introduction of the Inquisition into Spain to cope with the problem. This tribunal, founded in the 13th century by the Holy See to combat the Albigensian heresy, had already been introduced into Aragon, where it's functioned as at a moderate tempo. Jews were considered. Okay, we already did that. Okay. We did this, right? Okay, the failure of the Inquisition to stamp out Marranism quickly turned attention back to the Jews who, from the start, were the suspected cause of the Marranos' obduracy. Actually, the suspicion had become baseless. The rigors of the dreaded tribunal oddly seemed to stiffen the spirits of these opportunists whose devotion to Judaism had been as lax as was their present attachment to Catholicism, and to lead to a rapprochement between them and to former co-religionists. In the very shadow of the Quemadero, the place in which the auto de fe took place, they clung to as many Jewish rites and customs as they could, even circumcision of their children. One Jewish chronicler of the time told how one could ascend any tower in Spain on the Sabbath to see the many smokeless chimneys of homes of Marranos, who scrupulously observed the Jewish prohibition of lighting a fire on that day. Wow. Some of those crypto-Jews, once lukewarm in their Judaism, now greeted the flames of the stakes with the Shema Israel on their lips. Hero Israel, right? In a final act of faith and defiance. The Orthodox Jews, for their part, were not unresponsive. Their original contempt for their apostatized brothers gave way, in the face of their tribulation, to a fraternal sympathy, and a desire to reclaim them for their ancestral faith. The fanatical Torquemada did not fail to notice the enhanced bond between Marrano and Jew, and promptly sought to make the latter, hitherto immune to his jurisdiction, liable to the tribunal for encouraging Judaizing. So now, Jews who were not converts, now they're accused of trying to Judaize their brothers and sisters who were forcibly converted, or accept them back into the faith, which is, Judaizing. When this attempt failed, he demanded a more radical solution, the expulsion of all Jews from the kingdom. To this end, he approached both civil and ecclesiastical authorities, but found Ferdinand and Isabella, and no less Innocent V3, reluctant. A relentless pursuer, Torquemada was not to be put off. Two events came to his aid. In La Guardia, in 1490, Marranos were accused by another Marrano of plotting the downfall of Christianity, of using a consecrated host. Oh, we already know that story, right? And crucifying a boy in the process, right? A trial was held, and the accused was burned, and a cult arose around the alleged victim. Though to the present day, doubt as to the boy's existence has persisted. So the boy never existed, but they made up a story. Public reaction to the case gave Torquemada the opportunity to further his plea for expulsion. And the decisive thrust to his project came the following year, when Granada, the last stronghold of Muslim Spain, surrendered to Ferdinand. This completion of territorial reconquest brought with it an increased determination to unite Spain morally and religiously. Right? Hi, Rise Nation. How are you? On January 2nd, 1492, while still in Granada, Ferdinand and Isabella issued the fatal decree. All Jews must leave the realm by July 30 under the penalty of death. Since, in the words of the decree, Jews seduced the new Christians, and expulsion is the only efficacious means of putting an end to these evils. Stunned by the edict, powerful Jews led by Abraham Sr., chief rabbi and tax collector, offered an enormous sum of money to the king, who was known for his avariciousness. The story is told that at the critical moment, as Ferdinand reconsidered his decision, Torquemada rushed onto the scene, holding a crucifix aloft, and cried, "Judas Iscariot sold Christ for 30 pieces of silver. Will your highness sell him for 300,000 ducats? Here he is. Take him and sell him. Here he is. Take him and sell him." Upon which the king held fast to his decree. Many, including Senior himself, were converted by the majority. But the majority, broken-hearted, left within the appointed time. Jews in Spanish colonies like Sardinia and Sicily, who had now no contact with Marranos, and were on the best of terms with their Christian neighbors, were still included in the decree, despite the pleas of Christian authorities and people there. The story of the hardships of 300,000 refugees is told in all Jewish histories, a depressing tale of shipwreck, piracy, starvation, and enslavement. Fortunate were those who could go to Italy and Turkey, and the only places they were well received. In Turkey, the Sultan asked the refugees, "Do you call Ferdinand a wise king, who has impoverished his country to enrich mine?" It's because he recognized that the Jews, you bring Jews to your cities, they will bring you money. Aloof, thank you. Be alright, lady. Remember, Hashem loves you, and I do as well. You're important. Oh, you're very kind to say that. Very sweet. Do you see those small numbers? Those are citations, just so you know. I don't see any numbers. Oh, I see here. Yeah, 42, but then you have to go find it. Right? Which I could do, but I'm not interested. See, right? It's written here. 43, you can go find it. Thank you. That's the sources. The kings said this and it's recorded. But then we have the Candace Owenses that come the Candace Owenses that come and say, why would they do experiments on twins? Like, who would have the time to do that? Yeah, there are freaks and crazies that would do such things. Hello? Like, there are the 10 Bundys out there, and the what's his name? The guy who's gay and he killed all these men, you know? I've been 24 hours at least daily studying. Sorry if I'm not available, but I believe in your mission. Thank you. Very kind. I shouldn't be mean to people. I shouldn't be mean because it's not pleasant when I'm mean to people. Like, I once went on somebody else's channel, right? And he was so convinced that the Jews are evil and that Israel is going into Gaza to get Jews are going to Gaza to get resources from the Gazans. I'm like, what resources? You know, like, Jewish people are providing electricity for them, and we don't have to, but we're doing it because we're good people. And we gave them water. And they're like, oh, the Jews, the Israelis are going into Gaza. They started the war only to get the water sources. I'm like, water sources? Seriously? Like, we don't need water. We have water. We have whatever we need. We do desalinization, which means pumping the ocean and taking the salt out of it through a scientific way. We figured out, right? So we have plenty of water. So then the guy he was very rude to me and he blocked me, right? And he was like cursing at me and getting triggered and everything. I was like, okay, it's not very pleasant, you know, I shouldn't act like that to other people because I don't want to put other people through that, right? So I shouldn't really get so angry and upset, right? Because maybe the reason I'm getting all upset and angry is because then if you're asking me these questions, it's because then I have to go, and when I know what I'm reading is the truth, because this is Jewish history, and then I have to go now and dig up all the documents and the evidence to show you guys, and then that would be extra work for me. So then it makes me angry. Like, why should I do your research, you know? Like, come on. But then again, maybe it's good for me. Who knows? So I should apologize for being rude. Right? Okay. It got me upset a little bit because I'm like thinking, like Candace Owens. She says, I'm just asking questions. I'm just asking questions. And she goes and then what does she do? She starts saying, why would the Nazis go and do, why would they go and do experiments on children, on twins? Who would do that? No one would do that. I'm like, hello. The witnesses spoke, right? We have it written down, documented. Twins have spoken that survived the experiments, right? And they spoke about it on video. I even showed the videos of them, right? And Nazi doctors that were there at the time also confirmed that and said what they saw, and they wrote it down on the documents, what they saw. And it was like, this is a document. This is a documented evidence. We have the witnesses have spoken. It's corroborated. This is science, right? And she's gonna go and question that, which makes me angry. So then when people come and say, I'm just asking questions, I'm just like, what, you want to be like a little bitch? And start like, picking and trying to, don't worry about them study. Let them have their own mind fully. Let them have their own mind fully of what they seek. Woe to those who don't see the truth. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, rise to nation. Anyway. Where are we? Okay. It is a question many modern Spanish economists and historians have answered in the negative. Wherever these Sephardic exiles went, they carried their culture and even their language with them, evinced their cultural superiority, and assumed leadership of their communities. Okay, so this Sultan, he was a very good man, because he seemed to say, do you call Ferdinand a wise king who has impoverished his country to enrich mine? So basically getting rid of the Jews is impoverishing your country, and now he's getting his Jews. He thinks he's going to be rich. Most refugees went to neighboring Portugal, hopeful of a speedy return to the land they had occupied for 1,500 years. But theirs is another and, if possible, more painful story than the preceding. Our limitations permit only a summary. Refugees were allowed to enter Portugal for a price and for only a limited time by John II, from 1481 to 1495. Many, unable to quit the country when the allotted time was over, were enslaved and deprived of their children. Wow. So they kidnapped their kids, who ordered them out of the kingdom. Unwilling to forgo their economic benefit, however, he determined upon the mad plan, disfavored by the clergy, to force all Jews into the church. This was done with utter savagery. So that none might be concealed, all children were ordered baptized on one day. Whenever necessary, children were torn from their parents, baptized, and scattered throughout the land of Christian upbringing. So this is another crime of Christianity. They would kidnap kids, and so, but it seems to me that the Christians and the Muslims, they seem to have a similar type of thing, like they would kidnap people, Christians and Jews, to make them Muslim, right? So Christianity and Islam share a lot, in their culture of barbarism. Filled with revulsion, many Christian neighbors aided Jews to conceal their children. Adults were forced into the most deplorable living conditions as a device to compel their consent to be baptized. Some gave in, but most were dragged bodily to the baptismal front against a background of atrocities. Thus a new colony of Marranos formed. The familiar pattern recurred. Marrano prosperity, popular resentment, massacres, and introduction of the Inquisition. The Portuguese converts, even less willing Christians than the Spanish, became even more determined Marranos. That is, perhaps, why the Portuguese Inquisition was, if possible, more brutal than its Spanish counterpart, but less successful in attaining its objective. So I think, right, a lot of these Jews, even if they would have given their lives, even if they were offered death, it seems like they weren't offered death in this area. They were just forced to convert? Or, no, I'm wrong. They were massacred. right? Or just like forcibly massacre. They wouldn't like kill the Jews. They wouldn't kill the converts. They would force them and just baptize them, however they do it. And oh, you're Christian now, right? Whether they agreed to it or not, even if they said no, they didn't kill them. They just baptized them, from what I understand. Right? So the tribunal pursued the converts until the 19th century, and surprisingly, Marranos were discovered in Portugal even in the 20th. Okay, then it goes on to talk about the nature of medieval anti-Semitism, right? Wow. It's too miserable. Can't do this. Can't do it. I can't do it. It's too miserable. You know, like, it's important, right? It's important to read this stuff, but, you know, I just, it's just too miserable. I think I can't do more than what I did right now today with this subject, right? And, right? Alright, I'm gonna go now. Feel free to subscribe or not to subscribe. Feel free to like, not to like. And I'm sorry if I was unpleasant. And that's that. Anyway, have a great day. Bye.